Welcome back to Fab at 50, the podcast where we talk about everything that matters to women in midlife and beyond. From health to hormones to confidence to relationships and thriving in this next chapter. This is your space to feel informed, inspired, and empowered. Because turning 50 isn't the end of the story, it's just the start of an incredible new chapter. I'm your host, Kala Shekhar, and today we're talking about something that comes up again and again and again. When I hear women in their 40s and 50s, why does it feel like my body has completely changed and nothing that I used to do before works anymore? We're going to unpack hormones, metabolism, weight gain, and most importantly, how you can still find hope and practical solutions in this stage of your life. My guest today is the perfect guide for this conversation. Dr. Lamia Kamal is a UK qualified specialist in family medicine with a diploma in gynecology and certification in obesity management. She practices here in the UAE. And what I admire about her is she just doesn't bring medical textbook expertise. She brings lived experience. Dr. Lamia has personally struggled with hormonal imbalances, insulin resistance, and morbid obesity. She knows what it feels like to be in that space of confusion when you don't understand what your body is trying to tell you. Her mission today is to help women balance their hormones, lose weight, and truly thrive in your midlife. Dr. Lamia, thank you so much for joining us today. So let's start at the beginning. I always think that the most powerful doctors are the ones who've lived their struggles in their patients' face. Because it's one thing to study about hormones and metabolism in a textbook, and another thing to entirely feel it in your own body. Now, you've walked this journey, and I'd love for our listeners to hear that journey first. So how has your personal journey with obesity and insulin resistance shaped the way that you practice medicine today?
So thank you so much, Kala, for having me firstly on the podcast and for that intro. I'm truly touched with all you had to say. And you're absolutely right. The thing that I feel makes me unique is that I've gone through this journey. I'm still going through this journey. I'm still overweight. I'm still dealing with insulin resistance. And I truly know what it is to walk on this path. I was the 20-year-old in medical school with morbid obesity. And I remember going from doctor, nutritionist, weight loss coach, personal trainer, juice cleanse, gut cleanse. I've probably done everything.
Did it work at some point?
Yes and no. Things would work temporarily, and then the weight would come back on, or they wouldn't work at all. And then the other thing was, I remember going through a lot of loneliness. Doctors or practitioners in wellness, at least back then, would make it feel as if it was your fault. You know, you would walk away from the consultation thinking, I'm the broken one. I'm not doing it right. I don't have the right willpower.
Yeah. And this was in your 20s and 30s.
Yes.
Okay.
So, well, in my early 20s mostly. I remember going to this really famous nutritionist, and I remember her saying on our first consultation, what excuse do you have for looking like that?
Okay.
And I remember a friend of mine had gone to the same person, and she just had a baby, and she was like, "Oh, well, I had a baby." She was talking about that, and they were like, "So that's not an excuse." And this is the way, at least, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but this is how people spoke to me.
Yeah. And so there's a sense of insensitivity when people give advice. It's easy to give advice, isn't it?
Yes, it's so easy to say. My favorite is eat less, move more.
Change your lifestyle. Make lifestyle changes and you're good to go.
How?
But then
what
you
are you supposed to
have lived
do?
through that experience. You know it's not that easy. You know the hardships of trying to reduce your insulin levels or trying to reduce your weight. You know what the person goes through. And that makes a huge difference in your patients, because you're talking from your own experience.
No, my whole thing is about empathy and compassion. I have dealt with all of it. I know most of the things that come on this journey. And so my thinking is, how many times have you started a diet or a plan? and maybe some stressful event has come up, or a family occasion has come up, and then it's all just gone,
you just fall
gone
back.
away.
Yeah.
And then you blame yourself, and you leave the diet after
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
You've paid for it,
Yeah.
you've done all the investment, and then you've moved on.
Yeah.
And my thinking is, no, I will take you through that. I don't want you to just leave it, and then 3 months, 6 months go by, or it's New Year's, and you go, oh, didn't do it again this year.
And you can possibly talk from your own personal experiences. So, you know what,
Exactly.
I'm doing this myself. Let's do it together. you know?
Exactly.
And that gives the patient a little more enthusiasm to stick with it.
Yeah, yes. And I think the greatest reward since I started all of this is having people respond to that approach and respond to me, respond to that kind of understanding, and be like, yes, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Because too often, especially when you're doing something, your weight, it feels like a very personal thing.
Yeah.
It affects how you look, how you feel,
how you interact with people.
Exactly, your confidence. It affects your career, your success, your relationships. So we tie it to our worth.
Yeah.
Whether that's a societal thing or whatever, it just is that it is what it is, So to understand that you're not the only one on this journey, you're not the only one feeling like this, is very powerful. And then to kind of have somebody come along and say it's okay.
Yeah, I'm going through this too myself.
Yes.
Let's do this together.
Let's do it together.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I think that's why I do it.
Awesome,
that's what.
awesome. So, I mean, you said you're a family medicine doctor.
Yes.
And what about a diploma in gynecology and a diploma in obesity management? Like, how did they all tie up together?
So,
again, was it something because you were going through, you said, okay, let me learn more about this?
Because, I mean, it's amazing. Even with medical school, we didn't really learn a lot about insulin resistance. So then it was like, again, even in medical school, there was a lot of stigma against overweight people, obese people. It was unspoken, but it was there.
Yeah.
So part of what drove me into pursuing these kind of the certification and the diploma were trying to understand what's going on within me. And it was a long journey. It definitely was a very long journey. But now it's like there's a lot that I got to learn. There's a lot that I got to experience and finally understand that so much of what we're going through comes down to our hormones, comes down to our insulin levels and our insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And so much of what we are is linked to that.
Exactly. I mean, diabetes is now considered the fastest growing chronic disease. It's actually quadrupled in the last 40 years, according to the World Health Organization. And it all boils down to wrong lifestyle, wrong kind of food that you're eating, and things that you can avoid, right?
Exactly. I mean, we are more stressed than we've ever been. We are more sedentary than we've ever been.
Yeah.
Our food is very processed. Our sleep, our lifestyle it's kind of hit its perfect storm.
Yeah.
So nowadays, obesity, insulin resistance, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, we're seeing it younger and younger.
Yeah.
We're seeing people in their 40s having heart attacks,
Yeah.
People in their 50s being completely disabled. And this is, we have to change. We have to do something as a
At least create
society
an
to
awareness
conquer
towards
this.
it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, one of the most common frustrations I hear from women is, I eat the same way that I did in my 30s, but now the weight just won't budge. What worked for me in my 20s and 30s is not working for me in my 40s and 50s. And I know that it's not about weakness or failure, it's about biology. The truth is, our metabolism shifts, our hormones change, and what once worked suddenly doesn't work. And that can be really discouraging. So from your perspective, why do diets that worked in our 30s often fail us in our 40s and 50s?
This is a really good question, and you've hit the nail on the head. It's your biology. You have changed, not the diet or the program that you were following. And the main thing to do with that is your insulin resistance.
Okay.
So nowadays we know that with perimenopause and menopause, our estrogen levels, start going down from the age of 35. So from the age of 35, your estrogen's gradually going down, your hormones are changing, and estrogen is like a metabolic powerhouse.
Okay.
It drives our insulin sensitivity. So as your estrogen tails off, your insulin sensitivity goes down and your insulin resistance goes up.
Okay.
So whatever you were doing in your 20s and 30s, it is much harder metabolically
Yeah.
to have the same result in your 40s and 50s. So your actual core biology has changed.
So the key is to understanding why it's happening and not just
Exactly.
getting frustrated that it's not happening, right?
Yes, because what will happen is you'll go, oh, I did this before and it worked, and something must be wrong with me, or
Yeah.
I'm not doing it properly. And you just get stuck in this cycle.
Mm.
And the other thing is, estrogen is not just about our sugar levels and insulin. It controls our neurons, our brain. It has receptors for estrogen. So this brain fog that you get as you age is real,
Yeah.
is a real fundamental thing. This, your joints become weaker, your bone density becomes weaker. So a lot of women I've seen struggling with perimenopause and menopause, they'll say, gaining weight, I feel like I'm losing my mind, and brain fog, joint pain,
Yeah.
everything's breaking down. I
Yes.
don't understand what's going on. And it's all coming down to that hormonal
To
change.
one hormone, the estrogen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the impact it has on all your other hormones.
So once we understand the root cause, then we can tackle the problem from there. isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Instead of just getting flustered and wondering why things are not moving for us.
Exactly.
Awesome. So let's talk about insulin resistance itself. As I said, it's one of the largest growing chronic disease that's happening in the world. And you've mentioned insulin resistance as a key piece in this puzzle. Why women are not able to lose weight in their 40s and 50s. And I think a lot of women have heard this term of insulin resistance, but don't really understand what it means. Personally, I think the knowledge is power. So once you know why your body is resisting this weight loss, you can finally stop blaming yourself and start working smarter. So can you explain what this insulin resistance is in very simple terms and why it tends to show up so strongly in a person's midlife?
So insulin, the way to look at insulin, or at least the way I look at insulin, is that in the old days when we were, cavemen, you didn't know where your next meal was coming from. Insulin's job was to make sure you get the most out of that one meal that you have.
Okay.
So insulin makes you store fat, specifically belly fat. Insulin makes you hungrier.
Okay.
And insulin causes your sugar levels to go down. So again, everything that you eat goes towards fat. Its role is you take the sugar from the blood into the body, into your muscles, your bones, your liver. Now, we are blessed that we don't have those kind of problems anymore. We know where our next meal is coming from.
In fact, it's gone to the other spectrum.
Exactly.
We have too much of food at our disposal. We don't need to go out hunting for food.
Exactly.
It's right there.
You're not doing as much exercise and, walking and foraging to try and get that same food. So now what happens is you have too much sugar. You have too much insulin. And the body kind of develops a resistance to it. Specifically your muscles and your liver and your bone kind of become resistant to it. So that same insulin, it's like a lock and key type thing. It takes the sugar from your blood into the cells of your body. Now the body's become resistant to it. So your pancreas goes, I'll make more.
Yeah.
And again, the insulin levels keep going up and up to try and force that sugar into the muscles and the liver and the bones. What's left is fat.
Yeah.
Fat is like this big warm hug. It'll say, come on down, I'll take you, don't worry at all, we've got room. And in all that insulin shifts that sugar into fat. So you can imagine that with the lifestyle of processed food, stress, hormonal imbalance, the insulin levels keep rising.
Yeah.
So it's not just that your body's storing fat, it cannot burn fat either. It's like a fat storage signal.
Yeah.
So again, you can see how it just stands in the way of your weight loss. And as I said, estrogen is kind of like a powerhouse for insulin. So as estrogen goes down, the insulin resistance goes up. So again, the carbohydrates you used to eat in your 30s will have a completely different impact on your body in your 40s and 50s.
Okay.
So each change, who you were your entire life will suddenly shift.
Yeah.
And that's why women really struggle with this.
Because you thought you knew your body.
Exactly.
But suddenly, this is not the body that I knew.
Exactly. You feel betrayed almost.
Yeah.
You don't understand what's going on. And you go to what you knew, which is not working anymore.
So simple layman terms, when you talk of insulin resistance, what are the numbers we're looking for? What should be your ideal glucose level?
Your ideal
Your
glucose
HbA1c,
level
the
or
3
your
months average.
HbA1c. So ideally, you want your HbA1c around 5. That's
5,
your,
okay.
your optimal level. That's even lower. After 6.5 is when we say you're diabetic.
Okay.
Now,
So you're pre-diabetic from 6 to 6.5.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to check that.
Okay.
So,
And diabetic from
6.5
6.5
to
Of
almost.
course, they keep changing the goalpost.
Exactly.
I just read it could be even 7 as diabetic, so
Yes.
we never know for now. Mhm.
The truth is, you don't want to be anywhere close to
Yeah,
the pre-diabetic
yeah,
diabetic range. You want to be as out of it as possible.
Mhm.
So yes, the standards are based on an average
Okay.
that the population is facing. But yes, above 6.5 is diabetic,
Okay.
and I believe above 6 is pre-diabetic.
Okay. And what are the symptoms for someone just not even aware of this? You possibly have, or you don't have a family history of diabetes. Suddenly you've been told you are in the diabetic range, So what would the symptoms that anybody can sort of think about in their...
I mean, the scary thing is there are people out there that have no idea they're diabetic, and some of them present with their first, event, and that's how they get diagnosed. I've had so many patients who've presented with a heart attack, and then they've been told,
Okay.
"Oh, by the way, you're diabetic."
Oh, okay.
So one thing is to actually, even from a younger age, be really proactive about your health, your health screening, go to the doctor.
Especially if you have a family history. all the more.
Especially if you have a family history, all the more. But again, you have to be honest about where your lifestyle is.
Yeah.
So that kind of what you said at the beginning, knowledge is power. The more you understand what health is and how our body works, the more you can kind of suss out, right, I need to do this for myself.
So they're not necessarily telltale symptoms, right? If you've got these symptoms, you've got this. Right?
No,
not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. Having said that, so your classic symptoms of diabetes are you're drinking a lot of water, you're running to pass urine a lot more, you may be gaining weight, or you may be losing weight.
Okay.
Some people end up with weight loss instead of weight gain, and they're really happy about it.
Yeah.
But actually, the body is going through a metabolic storm. This is not what we want. So those are your kind of more classic symptoms. For pre-diabetics, especially women, your things are like fatigue, especially chronic fatigue, weight gain. You may get dark patches in the neck or your armpits or, in your inner thigh area. You may get weird boils, skin problems, fungus, thrush, all these kind of things. And you wonder, why has all of this suddenly come up, So these are all kind of hidden symptoms of sugar.
Yeah.
Some people notice joint pain, tingling, numbness. So, and you tend to dismiss these kind of things, but they're all tend to be there. I think the biggest one I would say is fatigue.
Okay.
People assume fatigue is
Watch
normal.
out for unexplained fatigue, and
Exactly.
you're fatigued even waking up in the morning.
Exactly.
Something's wrong.
Something is wrong. Yeah.
And go get a blood test and see where you are on the scales. Awesome. So, so that's what we talked about. So why insulin resistance can be one of the reasons you're not losing weight in your midlife. So this is where I think that many of us get stuck. We're told it's all about calories in and calories out. And if we just tried harder, if you just changed your lifestyle, your weight will melt off. But clearly, if that was true, then half of us wouldn't be struggling right now. And I think a lot of women need to hear this, that it's not just lack of willpower. It's not your failure. It is that the rules of the game have changed. So if calorie counting and willpower isn't the real answer, what is the first step that a person should take to start improving their metabolic health?
Yes.
So we've just sort of come to the conclusion it's not about what you eat or how much you spend your calories.
Exactly.
There's something more that's happening within the body that we don't
fully
exactly know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you've hit a very
And
controversial
estrogen could be one of the
debate.
biggest culprits there. right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, so to lose weight, yes, you still need to be in a calorie deficit. But if you eat for your hormones, then you will have a much more significant, a much more easier battle when it comes to weight loss, as opposed to just calories
Eat for
in
your
versus your
hormones.
calories out. So in that, the key thing to understand is carbohydrate.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people know about carbs, low carb diet, keto diet. Some people say you can eat carbs. Some people say you don't. You don't need to. It's a very controversial thing.
Especially in this time and age of social media.
Everyone
One
has
person
an
is saying,
opinion.
Of course you can eat rice and chapatis. And the other person says, no, don't touch that.
So my answer to that is you have to find what works for you.
Yeah, go for moderation.
Yeah, no, not just moderation. You have to find your carb tolerance.
Okay.
Because it's different for different people.
And how do we find that out?
So that's where the insulin resistance testing comes from, or doing something like a glucose monitor is a really good experiment.
Okay, so having a CGM works.
A CGM, because what will work for one person may not work for the next person. So one person can eat a higher carb diet and still lose weight and be happy and healthy and wonderful. And someone may not. But there's no one size fits all. So that's where the diets tend to fail. And that's where everyone preaches a different thing. So nowadays you'll have somebody saying do high intensity exercise. Someone will say do low intensity exercise. Eat carbs, don't eat carbs. Get your carbs from natural sources.
So each one is different. You know your body best, and you try to have that conversation with your body and try to understand your body. Yeah?
This is where a lot of people get lost. Because it's really difficult to figure out, this person's had to do this, and that person's had this.
Not to do that.
And it's very confusing.
So maybe if you can afford it, wear a CGM and monitor. See, I mean, I was shocked when I wore the CGM for the first time. I'm from the south of India, and I grew up on idlis and dosas, and I didn't realize that 2 dosas shot my insulin levels so high. And there's one school of thought which says go with what you grew up with. You don't eat something that's not in your culture, right?
Yes.
So dosas and idlis are the staple diet of most people in the south of India.
Absolutely.
And that wasn't good for me. And I realized that the glycemic index of a dosa is very high.
Yep.
Then what you do, it's like you have to completely revamp your entire diet.
Exactly. No, this is it. I remember I had a bowl of fruit. You think, fruit.
That's another misnomer.
Fruit is great.
Have fruit in the morning.
Yes. No, I mean, you should still eat fruits and vegetables. I'm not someone that's
not
against
the first
that.
thing on an empty stomach.
Not
in
the
morning.
first thing. My sugar levels rose sky high. I was like, and I'm, very proud to say that I'm at a point where my fasting insulin is normal and my HbA1c is normal.
Okay.
I just got it checked. It was like 4.1. I was so proud of myself.
Okay.
And still, I ate the bowl of fruit. Went like 200, 250.
Wow.
Whoosh.
Okay.
I was like, oh my goodness. Imagine. And then I tried things like bread, ice cream. And
so the CGM is the continuous glucose monitor is excellent for you to find out which food is causing.
Exactly. Because really, you don't want a spike more than 50.
Okay.
So if your baseline is sitting around 90, 100, ideally you want to reach a point where even after having food, it's maximum 150.
Okay.
Yes, we're quite lax when it comes to, you've eaten and come, that's why it's 200, 250, fine. But there's a reason why your body is behaving like that. And what's more interesting is, and this is where it requires a lot of mindfulness, really speaking to your body, is that sugar, it will make you irritable, grumpy, tired.
Tell me about it, mood swings. And
yes. And if you're aware of that, you're like, I had that carbohydrate and now I feel terrible.
Yeah.
This is why.
Okay.
And that is, so it's a really powerful experiment, I think, because it tells you personally, this is what is better for your body.
Work for you. So maybe wear the CGM for a couple of months?
Couple of weeks
is enough. Okay.
Enough, yeah. I think I did mine for 10 days. I experimented with all my foods and I got to know so much.
So know one thing, like someone can say, you know what, sourdough bread is the best kind of bread. The normal bread is not the best. But you never know your body, how it's going to react.
Yes.
So possibly wear a CGM and try out different kinds of food and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Exactly. Sourdough is a different example only because it's fermented, so it's very good for your gut. So, but absolutely different types of bread. I had this patient, I'll never forget him. He was a male, but he was in his 50s and he didn't want to go on medication. He was really upset at the idea that I have to take medicines for my diabetes. So he went out on his own initiative. It wasn't even me that suggested it. He got a CGM. And then he came to me and he said, when I have milk in my tea, my sugar is higher. When I have black tea, my sugar is lower.
Okay.
When I have gluten-free chapati or bajra roti or jawar ki roti, it's much better.
Okay.
When I have the normal, wheat roti, it's higher.
Yeah.
And he figured it out on his own. And I was like, you've hit that kind of the gold mine here. You've got that information.
Yeah.
And people will, when you see it, you can believe it.
So when you write down and you have a chart in front of you, then it scientifically shows, right?
Exactly.
What works for you and what doesn't work for you.
And then if you have the right person taking you through it, then you can have that tailored approach and you can learn, okay, this is why they're telling me not to eat this. Because otherwise it just feels like restriction.
Yeah.
And that doesn't last very long.
Yeah. So again, people have this confusion of, do I trust the CGM numbers or do I trust the pricking and those numbers? So
Ideally, the pricking number is the gold one.
correct
If you're
one, yeah.
comparing two readings, the pricking one is the
Yeah,
correct
but how
one.
often can you prick yourself during the day? And see?
Exactly.
You can't do that after every food, right?
Ideally, you have a
Yeah.
good CGM
Yeah.
that is giving you reliable information,
Okay.
and then you can kind of get that information that you need from it.
Okay. So insulin resistance, one of the biggest factors why you're not losing weight in your 40s and
Absolutely.
50s. The secret culprit there is estrogen. Watch that estrogen and
Yes.
cater for that hormone rather than catering for your general body weight loss.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah. Awesome. So we can't talk of midlife if you're not talking about menopause and HRT. We can't have a conversation because midlife and menopause, the two M's, they go very hand in hand. And the menopause, it impacts everything, your energy, your sleep, your mood, your weight. And HRT is such a hot topic right now. I mean, it's a vast, vast topic. We won't go very deep into HRT, but it's also a very confusing topic because women hear so many conflicting messages. Where does HRT fit into the picture? Is the hormone replacement therapy, is it good for your metabolic health? Going in for HRT, is it going to help you lose weight, or going in for HRT is going to cause you to increase weight? So where does this HRT fit into the big picture of metabolic health?
Yes. So it's, as you've said, it's a big topic right now. Lots of opinions on it.
Mhm.
And again, as I say, you have to do what's right for you.
Okay.
Essentially, it's hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
It's helping you giving you a little bit of estrogen.
Okay.
I remember in medical school, they used to tell us it's equal to taking one combined contraceptive pill per year.
Okay.
So it's a baby dose compared to what you've been living with your entire life of estrogen. And I feel it really helps women. I've had women with brain fog, hot flushes, fatigue, weight gain who find that they're much better when they're on HRT. There are pros and cons to HRT. So there are people who are on it long term. The vast majority of the population tend to be on it for about 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
Although as we're getting more and more research, that is changing. And we're learning more about estrogen after 50s, 60s, But HRT will help. It will help balance you metabolically.
Okay.
But I would say use that time to fix everything else in your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that even if you don't want to continue on the HRT, there's so much else you could be doing
Okay.
that will then help you.
So you can't blanketly say, okay, HRT is going to cause you to gain weight or lose weight. Yeah.
It just gives you a little nudge.
Yeah.
And as I said, one combined pill a year. Can you imagine? We've lived our lives with periods, pregnancy. So the tiny little pill will not do much.
Okay.
But it will help with that kind of really severe estrogen deficiency that you're going through.
So anyone out there is still debating, thinking about it? I mean, it's not a bad choice, you're saying.
No, I think it's great. I think it's amazing that people are talking so much about menopause and HRT. I remember my mentor in medical school said something like menopause is a feminist issue, and finally its time has come. In the past, women after 50 were kind of written off.
Yeah.
There you go, you're done,
And that's
your life
where
is over.
Podcasts like this come into force.
Exactly.
Because this is where you're starting your new life. It's a new lease of life, isn't
Exactly.
it? So you can make this the best time of your life if you
Absolutely.
know how to handle the other things that are
Yes, it's
pulling you down.
it's it's time has come. Our time has come.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing we know more. We have access to things like HRT. There's research being conducted. So it's a really incredible time, I think, from a scientific perspective, to be
just
alive.
know have the knowledge of what's happening. What is
Exactly.
the hormone that's affecting all of this? See what you can do about that hormone, and that should take care of all the parameters. Fix the estrogen, the insulin level will start responding.
Exactly.
Fix the insulin, the estrogen will start responding.
Exactly.
So learn and understand what it is, and not just give up and say, you know what, I'm in my midlife, I'm stuck with this
Yes.
belly fat, or I'm stuck with this weight gain. So if you know what
Exactly.
the cause is and you tackle the cause, it should be easier.
It should, yes.
So let's go back to the food itself, because we're talking of weight loss and in your midlife. We talk so much about food, what to eat, what not to eat. But sometimes I think we overlook the other powerful levers that can make a difference. whether it's strength training, movement, your mindset, or something even like stress reduction. These are all hidden gems that women don't realize. We always talk about food. What did you eat? What did you not eat? But there are so many other factors that we need to consider. So, what is the one underrated tool for boosting metabolism during menopause, and something that women don't talk about as much? So, it's not always about food.
No,
Right?
no.
Yeah.
The biggest thing actually is muscle mass.
Okay.
Your lean muscle mass is what protects your joints, it protects your bones, it drives your metabolism, it protects your heart.
Mhm.
So that's something that we don't think about much. But strength training, yoga, Pilates, all these kinds of forms of exercise will help you build muscle. It'll help your ligaments and your joints and kind of position you as in your best kind of metabolic picture for when you're hitting menopause. Because muscle will soak up all that sugar.
Yeah.
It will help with that insulin. But what tends to happen is you go on a low calorie diet.
Yeah.
I don't know where 1200 calories came from, but that's the buzzword. Everyone tends to go, if I eat 1200, then I will lose this much weight. And
So we're so focused on food that we forget all the other factors.
exactly. And our body actually burns muscle faster than fat. So anyone who's gone on any crash diet has lost muscle. And especially as we age, that muscle is a gold mine. People often think about how you look or the number on the scale. And even that, I would say, yes, you want to lose weight, but think about who you are in your 60s, your 70s, your level of function, how independent you are.
Your mobility of your joints.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all comes back to your exercise, your strength training, your muscle mass, your yoga, how flexible you are. And that's much more valuable than being 5 kilos less in
and
your 40s.
being that ideal weight that you think that you want to be.
Exactly. This we chase that number,
Yeah.
but you're harming your body.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is muscle. Do whatever you can to preserve and build muscle.
Okay. So what are the ways to build muscle? Weight training?
Weight
cardio?
training is a big one. Yoga is a very good one. People often underestimate yoga because it's not quite as, you're not carrying big bulky weights and going up and down. But yoga is incredibly good for muscle
I
building.
would recommend
Pilates.
those people to join my power
Exactly.
yoga class. I could get you into a sweat in 1 hour.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So yoga, Pilates, strength training are the top 3.
yeah.
Cardio is good for cardiovascular health. It will not cause you to build muscle. So yes, you want to have cardio exercise just to keep your heart active and healthy, but it will not make you build muscle. And if you're only doing cardio, you will lose muscle. So you have to have some form of strength training. So there are people who do a lot of running, but you'll find that they'll have gym days in their
They do
in
have their
plan.
strength training days.
Because the running will burn that muscle. But to run, you need to have those strength training days. So
estrogen, insulin resistance, and muscle mass.
exactly.
Most important.
Those are your 3
so
friends.
Again, muscle mass, when you talk of muscle mass, now is the era of Ozempic and Mounjaro and all of that.
Yes.
And taking these GLPs, they cause you to lose muscle, don't they?
So they don't directly cause muscle loss, but the problem is, the way they work is that they reduce your hunger.
Yeah.
They make you feel fuller for longer. And yes, they have a really good impact on your gut hormones. So I'm a big fan of GLP-1s because I think this is a great tool for anyone struggling with insulin resistance to now finally have an option out there
But it
for
doesn't
your
come
health.
without its
Exactly.
cons.
So what a lot of people think is, I'll take this GLP-1, I'll take 6 months, lose 10 kilos, 20 kilos, and then I'm done, finished, And the first thing is you have to focus on protein. If your practitioner is writing GLP-1s to you and they have not spoken to you about protein, that's a mistake. You have to have a good protein and strength train during that time on GLP-1s because you want to preserve that muscle as much as you can. Otherwise, when you're eventually off these injections, you've lost muscle. Your metabolism has actually slowed. And then you'll go back to eating the way you ate before the GLP-1s and you'll put weight on even faster.
Okay.
Because your insulin resistance it'll just come back.
Snap back, yeah.
Unless you've actually taken the time to figure out your diet, do the exercise, eat the protein. Your metabolism, the GLP-1s help the metabolism. They are not a magical weight loss solution. So they're great, but you have to use them
wisely.
Exactly.
Do your research on them
Yes,
and just not go by the magic number on the weighing scale. Okay, I took an Ozempic or been on Mounjaro, and then the magic digit comes up on my weighing scale and I'm done. No.
You're so happy.
Look at all the other factors. Look at the muscle mass that you might have lost. Look at the body getting dehydrated even more because of all of these. You have to tackle the whole picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, you don't ideally want to be on these injections forever.
Yeah.
And not, we don't have the research for that anyway. But at some point, you want to come off them.
Yeah.
And you have to think about your health then.
That's an interesting thought because it's such a big buzzword these days, being on GLPs and,
I had a
just,
patient.
Just 2 days ago, I think Serena Williams came out and she lost 40 kilos or something on Ozempic, and
it's amazing.
When the celebrities endorse it, then it becomes even more easier for people to request it from their doctors.
Yes. And in a way, I'm so happy that she did that because this is someone who's probably more athletic than most
she did mention it. She says, look, I'm a Grand Slam tennis player and you think I don't exercise? I do everything.
And she needed it.
Yeah.
So there is something to be said about there will be a roadblock that your body puts up that no matter how hard you try, you may not be able to go through.
Yeah.
And that's why these GLP-1 medications make it easier. And well done on her for taking charge of her
coming
health.
out in the open and saying.
Yeah, it takes guts.
Yeah.
It does. It takes guts. But I had a lady just yesterday saying, can you write Mounjaro for me? My boyfriend's coming to visit in a couple of months and I just want to lose 10 kilos before he comes. And I was like, oh goodness, no.
Yeah.
This is not something, you don't lose weight for somebody else, but also it is such a much more complicated thing. You have to see these injections as one part of your plan. Your diet, your exercise, your stress, it all is there in your hormones.
Yeah.
These things you have to take into consideration.
So just listen to your body differently than what you did in your 20s and 30s. Watch out for the big E, the estrogen.
Big E.
Watch out for the insulin resistance numbers, and then see if you can use any of these medications to bring it back to normal, but still tackle the root cause, right? And keep working on that root cause without over-depending on the medications. Because at some point, you have to come off these medications, right?
Exactly. So your food, your movement, and your level of stress. And within that, I think comes your level of compassion to yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be really compassionate towards yourself to be able to get into a place to listen to your body.
Yeah.
That's where I think people
don't. Because there's so much of noise outside.
Exactly.
There's so much of noise outside that it's overwhelming and it's very confusing,
Yeah.
And where do you find that quietness to listen to your body? It's constantly talking to you. If only you would listen.
Exactly. And, I remember you'll have some cereal bar first thing in the morning, then you're cranky and you're irritated, you have a fight with somebody, then you're tired, then you have a coffee.
There was a whole era of sugary cereals, right? Sugary cereals, the first thing in the morning. What do you believe now? Now the norm is like, oh, no, you have to avoid the sugary ones first thing in the morning. Yeah.
So, but we are how do we tackle this? As a society, we are go.
Yeah.
We're achieving, we're trying to conquer things and do things, and we're just on the run all the time.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next big thing. We said food, don't just focus on the numbers and don't just focus on the calorie intake and calorie output, but also look at other things that are going on in your life. Like out of that, the most important would be stress and sleep.
Yes.
Two big things that people tend to ignore,
Yes.
and we're so focused on the food aspect. Sleep, such a big important thing. And these days of doom scrolling, people are just doom scrolling till 1 a.m. at night, and then you wake up being fatigued. It's such a vicious cycle.
Exactly.
And then you take a nap in the afternoon because you didn't sleep the previous night, and that nap causes you not to sleep that night. And then it's just that cycle that's going on. So how important is sleep in this whole picture?
Is so important.
So important.
You can't underrate the value of sleep. As you say, doom scrolling, it affects your, it kind of messes with your hormones to do with sleep, to do with relaxation. It messes with your cortisol. So that's your stress hormone. And cortisol links back to insulin. It makes insulin resistance worse.
Gosh, everything leads to, all roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to.
I know. I said that the other day. I was like, all roads ultimately go back to insulin.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the cortisol will make you fatigued. It will make you, these weird, some people notice period irregularities and things on cortisol. And you'll be unhappy, you'll be stressed, you'll be burnt out. You will not lose weight when you're in this kind of thing. And you will not be happy, more importantly. And sleep and stress, again, those two are so interlinked when it comes to your cortisol. So doom scrolling is a big, they say have a routine at night.
Yeah. Switch off all
avoid your
electronics
screens
an hour before you go to bed. We've heard that. We heard that. We know that. But
we don't do
still,
it.
Yeah. But still, how many of us still have our phones on our bedside table, and the distraction, the light coming out from the phone.
Yes.
All of these matter, don't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they all affect your body in tiny, tiny ways. And it just pushes it further and further away from where it is you want it to be.
So everything is interlinked.
Exactly.
Right? This sleep pattern. I would suggest anybody to try this. Have a couple of days of late night sleeping and wake up and test your sugar in the morning. It's going to be high.
It's going to be high.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's direct connection to...
exactly. And that's because of how you slept.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating, if anybody does a CGM, is have a donut or something, see the impact it has on your sugar levels, then have a night of poor sleep, have the same donut at the same time, and the sugar response will be much worse.
Wow. Okay.
So not only are you stressed, you're sleep deprived, you've been up late doing whatever, and then you go back to what you eat every day.
Yeah.
Your whatever it is, your roti or anything. But the insulin and the sugar response is much worse on that day. And again, all these things interlink.
Yeah.
It links to your, your estrogen, your progesterone, your cortisol, your insulin. And it's no wonder we're so confused when it comes to trying to tackle all these problems.
It's very simple when you break it down, right?
Yes.
Don't just focus just on the food. And we're so paranoid about the carbs that you eat and the sugars that you eat that you forget all the other paraphernalia that surrounds it, right?
Exactly.
The stress, the sleep, the weight training, all of that are equally important.
Yes. And you can't take away the impact of food, but even with a moderately good diet and all those other things, you will lose probably more weight than with a very strict, restrictive diet. So it's all about, you have to really invest in yourself. You have to take out that time of, this is my time to figure out what works for me.
That's such a good experiment. Have a donut, test your CGM, what the numbers are, and have a bad sleep and have the same donut and test and then see the difference.
Yes, there will be a difference, 100%.
Awesome. That's interesting. So, let's move on to our next topic. Somebody who's listening to this podcast, they go home and they're like, okay, give me one point, give me one thing that's tangible. And because there's so much of information around that makes you overwhelmed. So if there's one small change that can feel like a lifeline. So if any listener out there is just about to sit down for her next meal, and she's asking, give me one practical shift that I can make that can help me with my metabolic health. What can we say that one change that you can make?
So the one change that may apply that everybody could easily incorporate would be the order of how you eat food.
Oh, that's such an important thing. Yes.
Now there's a lot of awareness about it. There's a lot of research about it. So if you have your vegetables first, then you have your protein, and then you have your carbohydrate, the effect of that same carbohydrate will be much lower.
Yeah.
So this is something everybody can do.
Yeah.
You don't have to cut out carbs, dairy, gluten. There's so much other stuff. But just the order with what you eat can help.
Don't stress on measuring the carbs, measuring the protein. Just eat them in the right
in that order.
Yeah.
And at least your sugar level will remain stable.
Yeah.
So, and that it may not fix everything, but it's just one step in the right direction. When you start working with your metabolism, suddenly things will start working for you. You'll feel, healthier, energetic, attractive, confident, and you'll be like, oh, great, this is great. But it's all about that metabolism. So if you can just figure out, but yes, a vegetable, protein, and then carbohydrate.
So a salad or a vegetable, the protein, and then the carb.
Yes, that order will just help. One thing you can do that helps you shift just in the right direction.
So if you're sitting down for your next meal and you're thinking, what is the one thing I can do now to change my lifestyle, change my metabolic health? Start with your salad or your vegetable,
Yes.
then your protein, and then your carb.
Yes. Enjoy your dessert.
Yeah.
And probably the other thing I would say is when you're eating your dessert or your carb, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
The more we stress about that carbohydrate, the more the effect that carbohydrate will have on our blood sugar. You might as well just enjoy. You just, dil khul ke, just enjoy, eat it, and then fine. Next meal, back to basics. Okay. And again, that sugar level will thank you. And then your metabolism will thank
So
you.
no need for any fancy diets or completely cutting off carbs or going this way or that way. Stay balanced,
Yes.
but eat in the right order. Eat at the right time.
Yes.
Don't eat between meals or don't eat much late at night. All those ancient thoughts and advices that our ancestors would give us, they hold true even now.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
And again, it's about what works for you.
Mm.
So there will be people who respond very well to things like intermittent fasting.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah.
There'll be people that just can't do it.
Mhm.
Fine.
Mhm.
You don't have to.
Say one rule
There's
fits
no
all. Yeah.
there's no one size
Mhm.
fits all.
Mhm.
There's some people that do really well and feel really well on a low carb diet.
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm.
There you go. There's some people who say, no, I can't live without this. This is it.
Yeah.
Okay, then we balance it. We use other ways.
Mhm.
You just have to find what works for your sugar level
Yeah,
and
yeah.
insulin level.
So pause, take a back seat, talk to your body, listen to your body, and you'll be
Yes.
surprised what it tells you.
Exactly.
So many little clues it keeps giving here and there, doesn't it?
It is there. It is talking to you the
Yeah.
entire time. It's just we have to learn how to talk back.
Yeah. And then if you work with your body and listen to what it's saying and work with it, there's
Yeah,
no
you can-
reason why your body shouldn't change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why you can't achieve the health that you want.
Yeah, awesome. So when doing everything right isn't enough, that's the state we are in now. I hear from women who say, you know what, I'm exercising, I'm eating clean, I've cut out the sugar, I'm doing everything right, but still nothing is changing. And that can be so heartbreaking because it makes you feel broken. But often it's not about the effort that you've done, it's about an underlying issue that nobody has spotted yet. So, in those cases, what medical issues should women ask their doctors to investigate about?
So the first thing I would say is about getting tested for insulin resistance. So a lot of people will have a normal fasting sugar and they'll have a normal HbA1c. And when I talk to them about insulin, they'll go, no, I don't have sugar. No, this is not
Nobody in my family has, so I don't have either. Yeah.
Exactly. But what you need is to get a fasting insulin, fasting sugar, and what's called a HOMA score, which is a ratio of the two. It tells you what your insulin resistance is sitting at. It gives you a number. And already with that, you'll be quite clued on, okay, this is why I can't lose weight. That's one. The second is your thyroid. The thyroid, just like insulin, another hormone I'm adding to the mix, is again like a metabolic powerhouse. It links to your ovaries, it links to your stress, your adrenals, and it links to your insulin. So a lot of people will have a sluggish thyroid, an underactive thyroid, and they won't realize. And that's something that we can fix for you. With the right lifestyle, you can fix your thyroid as well. You don't need medication always to have a balanced thyroid level.
We'll do another podcast on thyroid as a separate podcast.
I know it's such a big topic, but that's another thing that you should be asking your doctor to get checked. So yeah, insulin resistance, thyroid, and then I would say checking for your nutrient deficiencies, your vitamin D, especially in this part of the world. I don't think I've met a single person who's not deficient.
B12.
Vitamin B12.
Vitamin K.
Yeah, so
check your iron levels.
Yes, all these things will have a role. And also then, and check your cortisol and these kind of things. You know, they will all give you the information that was maybe missing.
Okay.
And you can then kind of figure out where what you're doing is not working for the body, even though you're working so hard.
And even if you think you're in the pink of the health, go get these tests done. You know, you never know what it can reveal. If it's all good, it's good. You know, but still, you'll get to be aware of the numbers, right?
Exactly.
Amazing conversation, Dr. Lamia. This was very, very interesting. And you know, I always like to close our conversations on a hopeful note, because let's be honest, midlife can sometimes feel like your body has turned against you. The weight gain, the fatigue, the brain fog, the sleepless nights. It's easy to feel betrayed by the very body that you've lived in for decades. But I also believe that in your 40s and 50s, this is a stage that it can be incredibly powerful too, if only you shift your perspective. Our bodies are not failing us, they're just asking us to pay attention in a new way. So it's the beginning of a new relationship with your body. It's not about fighting harder, it's about listening deeper. And when you give your body what it truly needs, whether it's rest, nourishment, balance, or compassion, your body is going to respond. So let's wrap things up with one final question. What is your number one message of hope for women in their 40s and 50s who feel stuck and who feel that they've tried everything and nothing is working?
I would say
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Yes. You have to listen to your body.
Mhm.
Take that time. You deserve it.
Yeah. Mhm.
This is your time.
Yeah.
You've had your babies and
Mhm.
you've done your things
Mhm.
and your careers and your studies and
Mhm.
looking after everybody else.
Yeah. Mhm.
And this is your time to
And don't let
finally
these numbers decide your worth.
exactly,
Yeah. Mhm.
love yourself enough to go and figure out what it is that's actually going to work for
Yeah.
you,
Mhm.
and have the courage to walk that journey.
Yeah. Mhm.
It does take courage, definitely.
Mhm.
And find what works for you.
Mhm.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work the first time, keep going.
Yeah. Mhm.
There will be an answer.
And there is hope at the
And
end
there
of
is
the tunnel.
hope.
Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. And your body has not betrayed you.
Yeah.
It's just doing its best.
Yeah.
And we have to change the way we talk to it
Yeah.
and the way we
Mhm.
care for
Mhm.
it.
It's just a new beginning, a new relationship with the same old body.
Exactly.
Right? Awesome. So, Dr. Lamia, thank you so much for sharing not just your medical expertise, but also your personal journey, because it's that combination that makes your message so powerful. It's one thing to read about hormones, metabolism, and insulin resistance in a textbook, but it's another thing to hear it from someone who's actually walked that path. And you've taken the confusion, the frustration, the trial and error that so many women experience, and you've turned it into a roadmap of clarity and hope. That blend of science and lived experience is exactly what women need at this stage of our lives. I hope you've gained as much as I have from this conversation. These midlife years can feel overwhelming, but they can also be a powerful opportunity to understand yourself, take charge of your health in new ways. If today's episode gave you one insight or one small step that you can take towards feeling better in your body, remember, it's worth it. And you're not alone on this journey. We're all here to support you in your midlife and make this the most vibrant, most fulfilling part of your life. Thank you.